She was deemed impossible to love until he appeared. The wind screamed through the Colorado Rockies like it had a soul of its own, wild, freezing, and ancient. Snow whipped through the air in sheets, painting the jagged cliffs white under a sky thick with storm clouds. The only sign of civilization in that icy wilderness was a solitary wooden cabin halfway up the mountain, smoke curling from its chimney like a lifeline to warmth. Inside, the glow of a fireplace stretched shadows across the walls. Thomas Reeve, 32, ex-military and now self-imposed recluse, sat hunched over a cracked mug of coffee. His breath fog in the cold air. Insulation wasn't perfect, but it was home. Or, at least, it was quiet. He hadn't spoken to another human in 6 months. That's exactly how he wanted it. Until tonight. The sound came just after sunset. A low-frequency hum, more vibration than sound. Thomas froze. No animal made that noise. He stepped outside, shotgun in hand, eyes scanning the dark ridges. Then he saw it. A streak of blue light tore through the clouds, silent, smooth, and fast. It didn't fall like a meteor. It landed. He didn't think. He moved. 10 minutes of hiking in knee-deep snow brought him to a clearing where something clearly not from Earth lay half buried in ice. A smooth, curved vessel, glowing faintly. It hissed like it was breathing. Then it opened. She stepped out slowly, clutching her side. Blood, if you could call it that, dripped down her pale blue skin, darker and thicker than water. Her hair was long, gold like wildfire under moonlight, matted with ice. Her eyes met his, silver, luminous, alert. She said something he didn't understand. Her voice was melodic but strained. Then her knees buckled. He caught her before she hit the snow. Back in the cabin, he laid her down gently on his cot, stoking the fire to full blaze. The room glowed in a flickering halo of amber light. She winced as he unzipped her metallic-looking suit to check the wound. Beneath it, her skin shimmered like polished stone, but she bled like any living being. Her voice cracked again. A word. He couldn't place it. Maybe a name. "You're okay," he said quietly, even knowing she didn't understand. "You're safe." Her gaze locked with his. Then she said, slow and deliberate, "Not safe. They come." He didn't sleep that night. She drifted in and out of consciousness, breathing shallowly. Thomas cleaned the wound, wrapped it in gauze, kept the fire alive. And he kept watching the sky. At sunrise, she opened her eyes again. She sat up slowly, surprised by the blankets, the fire, the human watching her like a ghost had landed in his home. "I'm Thomas," he said simply, tapping his chest. "Thomas." She blinked, then pointed at herself. "Lyra." Her voice was deeper now, less strained. He nodded. "Lyra." The days that followed were filled with cold, silence, and fragile gestures. Thomas taught her words: water, fire, sky. She repeated them with a strange, elegant accent, quick to learn. In return, she showed him fragments of her world through sketches, symbols carved into frost, glowing tech from a small device she refused to let out of reach. Her people, she explained in broken English, did not look kindly on emotional weakness. Love, as she described it, was seen as primitive. Her body, tall and powerful, had been seen as too much, unfitting for the delicate, narrow ideals of her kind. 17 males rejected her for mating. One had called her weapon in disguise. When he asked why she was here, she hesitated. "Run," she said finally. "Escape. Alone. Illegal. A fugitive." One night, as wind howled outside and snow battered the cabin like a siege, Lyra stood near the window, eyes fixed on the white landscape. Thomas watched her from the corner, mug in hand. "You know," he said quietly, "if anyone asks, you're my cousin from Canada. Tall jeans." She turned. The corner of her mouth lifted. Almost a smile. "Not cousin," she said softly. "Not same." He raised an eyebrow. "No," he said, stepping closer. "Definitely not the same." Her silver eyes didn't waver. "You saved me," she said. "What?" He paused, then shrugged. "Didn't seem right. You were bleeding. Afraid. Looked like you needed someone. No one did before." He looked away, jaw tight. "Yeah, well, maybe they were all idiots." Her hand brushed his blue skin, cold but steady. "Maybe it was just cabin fever. Maybe it was the fact that two exiles had found each other in the loneliest place on earth. But in that moment, something changed. Snow fell without pause for 3 days. The cabin was buried halfway up its walls. Power was long gone, but Thomas had backup batteries, gas for the stove, and a fire that never died. Inside, the silence between him and Lyra was no longer cold. It was charged. She had begun wearing one of his flannels over her uniform. The sleeves didn't fit, but she liked the smell. He noticed. Neither of them said anything about it. But something was changing in her, more than the healing wound. She was restless. Every night, she stepped outside and scanned the sky like a soldier expecting incoming fire. She'd grown more alert, more cautious. On the 4th morning, Thomas found her dismantling a long metallic rod from her crashed ship. Its core pulsed faintly with blue light. He raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? Lyra hesitated, then held the rod up. Beacon. Broken. I destroy before they trace. They? His tone shifted. You mean someone's coming? She nodded slowly. Not rescue, she added. Purge. Thomas blinked. Wait, like, kill you purge? Yes. He stared at her. You're telling me your own people sent a kill squad after you? They call me traitor. Heart too big. Voice too loud. She tilted her head. You understand. Soldier. War. No emotion. His blood chilled. They're hunting you for feeling. Lyra nodded once, expression hard. We're not allowed to bond. Weakness. Like virus. Spreads. Dangerous. Thomas ran a hand down his face, pacing. Jesus. And you, she said carefully. You now see me. No. They erase. Wait. Hold on, me too. She walked over, her presence steady and electric. You protect me. They punish you. Awesome, he muttered, rubbing his temples. This is why I moved to the middle of nowhere. That night, they sat by the fire, both quiet. The shadows danced across the log walls, casting alien shapes. Thomas stared into the flames. So what now? You keep running forever. Lyra didn't answer at first. Then I thought, Earth was last place they not reach. And now? She looked at him. Now I wrong. He glanced at her. How much time do we have? She closed her eyes for a moment, then tapped her wrist device. A soft red pulse blinked. Maybe 4 rotations. 4 days. Yes. He stood, restless. We can't fight them, Lyra. Not here. Not with a shotgun and a fireplace. I not ask fight, she said calmly. Only stay. He stopped moving. Stay. Until end. I not want to die alone. Thomas swallowed. Then he sat back down beside her. You won't. The next morning, they prepared. Thomas dragged supplies from the storage shed. He built traps. Not that they'd do much against interstellar weapons, but it was something. He blocked windows, reinforced the door with metal sheets. Lyra created a thin force barrier near the back wall using scavenged tech, but said it wouldn't last long. She was slower now. The wound had reopened slightly. Her hands trembled when she thought he wasn't looking. He saw. They didn't talk much that day. There was too much to think about. That night, snow fell again. He found her outside in the dark, standing barefoot in the snow like she couldn't feel the cold. You okay? I never see this much white, she said softly. My world is red. Huh. Dry. No softness. He stepped beside her. Colorado. Not always this peaceful. But when it is, it's magic. She looked at him, eyes glowing in the dark. You different from files, she murmured. Files. Human males. We study. Aggressive. Loud. Want dominance. Thomas snorted. Well, I did punch a vending machine once. She tilted her head. You listen. You protect. You give space. He looked at her. No one did that for you before. No. Only judge. Compare. Touch without ask. Thomas's jaw tightened. I'm not them. I know, she whispered. She stepped forward. Her hand found his. His fingers closed around hers. Later that night, inside, she leaned against him on the cot. Her breathing was steady. He could feel her pulse through her skin, slow and strong. I afraid, she said suddenly. He looked down. Of what? Hope. Thomas stayed quiet. If I live, she whispered, what then? I not belong here. I hunted everywhere. No home. He gently moved a strand of her golden hair behind her ear. Then we find one. Lyra's breath caught. You mean with you? If you'll have me, he said. Oh. I'm already being hunted. May as well go all in. She let out something between a laugh and a sob. You mad? I live in a cabin in the mountains and took in a blue alien fugitive, he said. I think that ship sailed. She buried her face in his chest. And for a moment, just a moment, there was no fear, no war, no blood, just the hum of the fire and two hearts trying to beat in sync. The warning came just after midnight. A high-pitched ping from Lyra's wrist device sliced through the quiet like a blade. She bolted upright. Thomas, already half awake, reached for the flashlight, but she grabbed his arm, eyes wide. Too late, she whispered. Outside, the wind had gone still, dead still, the kind of unnatural silence that warned every living creature in the forest to hide. Then came the sound, a low, throbbing hum, deep and slow, vibrating through the snow-covered ground. Thomas stepped to the window, peeled back the frost-covered curtain. There, hovering silently above the tree-line, was a black, triangular craft. No lights, no flame, just the impossible presence of something that shouldn't be floating in gravity, and yet was. He turned to Lyra. Is that them? She nodded once, face stone. Scout class. Stealth. Do they know exactly where you are? She hesitated. Sense presence. Emotional echo. They follow it. He stared. They track feelings. They track me. And anyone who connects. Thomas swore under his breath. So me helping you. Put target on you. She finished, eyes lowering. She stood, pulled what was left of her suit armor from the chair, strapping it on with quick, practiced movements. The side wound still bled. She gritted her teeth. You're not going out there, Thomas said firmly. I delay them. You run. He stepped in front of the door. No, you must. They erase. They always erase. I'm not running. We stand together. Her voice cracked. What? He cupped her face gently. Because you matter. Her silver eyes shimmered, caught between defiance and something rawer. I'm not strong enough anymore, she whispered. Then lean on me. Outside, the hum grew louder. Snow began to vibrate off the roof. Then a thud, heavy, deliberate, landed somewhere close. A second one. Footsteps, not boots. Something heavier. They were already on the ground. The cabin lights flickered. Lyra's device projected a 3D scan of the area. Two life forms approaching fast, cloaked in adaptive armor. More advanced than anything Thomas had ever seen, even in combat. They won't talk, he asked. They don't speak, she said. They purge. Got it. He chambered a round into his old rifle. Let's make him work for it. Lyra gave a tight, bitter smile. You really mad? I've been called worse. Then the wall exploded. The first agent came in like a shadow, tall, faceless, armor humming with kinetic energy. It launched a spear of pure light toward Thomas, but Lyra moved faster than he could blink. She tackled him, both hitting the floor as the beam scorched the wall behind them. Lyra rolled up and fired her salvage plasma emitter. Blue light seared into the intruder's chest, knocking it back through the broken wall. Go now, she shouted, panting. I'm not leaving you. The second one entered through the ceiling, dropping silently like death itself. It raised a blade that shimmered like liquid obsidian. Lyra pushed Thomas aside again, but not fast enough. The blade slashed across her shoulder. She screamed, stumbled, fell to one knee. Thomas shot the second intruder point blank. The round did nothing. The alien turned, mechanical head tilting, almost curious. Thomas grabbed the crowbar by the firewood rack and swung it with everything he had. It cracked against the enemy's mask, no damage. But the impact bought time. Lyra rose, one hand glowing with an unstable energy pulse. She rammed it into the enemy's back. It shrieked, inhuman and horrible, and collapsed into itself. Smoke, then stillness. Only one enemy remained, crawling from the snow outside, dragging damaged limbs. Lyra limped toward it. No, Thomas said. You're bleeding out. I finished, she said. If they report back, others come. She raised her hand, then hesitated. The creature looked at her, not with fear, not with rage, but something else. Recognition? They know you? Thomas asked. Lyra nodded, slowly. He was first. First what? First to reject me. Thomas froze. The thing coughed, a static, glitching sound. It reached out. Not to strike. to touch her face. Lyra flinched. I feel, the agent whispered. Because of you. Then it shut down. She collapsed beside it. Thomas rushed forward, catching her just before she hit the floor. Blood soaked through the flannel, turning it purple-black. Her breathing was shallow. I'm here, he whispered. Stay with me. Her eyes fluttered open. I broke rule, she said, voice faint. I infected him. With emotion. Thomas held her closer. Good. She let out a shaky breath. More will come. Then we'll fight again. She shook her head. Not you. I stay. You live. I'm not walking away, Lyra. Her hand touched his cheek. Promise, remember me. He clenched his jaw. I'm not going to need to remember you. You're staying alive. Stubborn, she whispered with the smallest smile. He kissed her forehead. Always. The storm returned by morning. Snow came in horizontal sheets, thick enough to swallow the horizon. The air was sharp with ozone and scorched metal. Inside the battered remains of the cabin, Thomas wrapped Lyra in a thermal blanket. Her body burned with fever. The wound on her shoulder was infected. The bleeding wouldn't stop. He had no more medkits. We need help, he muttered. We need something more than duct tape and hope. Lyra stirred, her voice slurred. There's one place. Thomas leaned in. Where? She reached into her armor and pulled out a crystal no larger than a coin. Hexagonal, pulsing with dull green light. Emergency beacon. Earth prototype. Hidden. Will it bring more of them? No. Different signal. Goes far. Not military. Outlaws. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Wait, you're telling me we're about to call space criminals? Better than soldiers, she coughed. Criminals don't follow orders. It was insane. Dangerous. Possibly suicidal. He activated it anyway. The beacon emitted a low-frequency tone, barely audible. Thomas placed it near the fire and waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. He tried to distract himself, clearing debris, repairing what he could. Lyra drifted in and out of sleep, whispering in her language. He didn't understand the words, but the feeling in them cracked him open. Grief, longing, something close to surrender. He couldn't lose her. Not now. Not after everything. Suddenly, the fireplace pulsed with light. The beacon flared, and then shut off. Thomas froze. Lyra, her eyes opened, just barely. They heard, and then, with a deep boom, the air above the cabin split open. The craft wasn't like the sleek death machines from before. This one was crooked, patched, almost falling apart. Its metal hull covered in graffiti and strange carvings. It hovered just above the ground, creaking and hissing. A door dropped open. From inside, 3 figures emerged. The first was a tall insectoid with translucent armor and a scowl. The second, a humanoid covered in bronze, plating with a crooked robotic arm. The third looked almost human, short, gray-skinned, with sharp yellow eyes and a permanent smirk. Thomas stood between them and Lyra, holding the shotgun with shaking hands. The gray-skinned one stepped forward, hands raised. Easy, soldier boy. We're not here to kill her. She's one of ours. Thomas blinked. What? She chose emotion. That means she chose us. Lyra coughed from behind. They're the exiled. The gray one nodded. And she's not dying on our watch. They worked fast. The bug-like medic injected Lyra with something glowing. Within seconds, her breathing steadied. Color returned to her cheeks. Thomas stepped aside as they carried her aboard the ship. He followed without hesitation. Inside, the craft smelled like oil and ash, but it was warm, alive. The crew treated Lyra like one of their own. No judgment, no cold protocols. Just care. In the corner of the med bay, Thomas sat quietly, watching his life return to her inch by inch. Then the gray-skinned one sat beside him. You're in this now, he said. They'll come for you too. I figured. Name's Creel. We move constantly. You stay, you disappear with us. Thomas didn't answer right away. She changed me, he said finally. Didn't ask to, just by being herself. Creel nodded. That's what they fear most. Not weapons. Not wars. Connection. Thomas looked toward Lyra, asleep in a recovery pod. I'm not leaving her. Didn't think you would. The ship lifted off as the storm raged below. Thomas stood beside the window, watching the earth vanish beneath clouds. He felt weightless, not just from gravity, but from something heavier. For the first time in years, he felt alive. Creel approached again. This is the part where things get harder. Because we're fugitives? Because now you're choosing love in a universe that punishes it. Thomas smiled faintly. Then we fight for it. Somewhere deep in the black of space, Lyra woke. Thomas was there, holding her hand. You came with me, she said, barely more than breath. He squeezed her fingers. All the way. Her eyes filled with something fragile. I don't deserve it. Yes, he said. You do. You were never impossible to love. They just didn't know how. If you've ever rooted for an impossible love, this is your story. Follow us for more human alien romances where emotion breaks every rule and saves lives. The ship had no name, not because it was stealth tech, but because none of its crew could agree on what to call it. Some referred to it as the Drift, others as the Wound, depending on how much they drank the night before. Lyra, when she was strong enough to speak again, called it home. Thomas didn't argue. He just followed the pulse of her recovery, one step at a time. Days passed in deep space. Lyra healed slowly. Her wounds knit beneath glowing salve. Her voice returned first, gentle, raspy, but stronger each day. She could sit up by day 5, walk by day 8. The smile returned last. When it did, it was faint but real. Thomas stayed close. He helped her eat, clean her wounds, learn the ship's layout. She never asked him to stay, but she never needed to. Do you miss Earth? She asked one night, their backs against the humming wall of the med bay. He thought about it. I miss my cabin. Coffee. Cold air. She looked down. I'm sorry. He shook his head. Don't be. I've lived in silence for years. I never felt more awake than I do now. Her fingers brushed his. Still a little cold. You gave up everything. I didn't lose it, he said. I traded it. For something better. She didn't respond. But she didn't let go of his hand, either. Life on the ship was strange. The crew was small, 6 in total. All exiled. All different. Creel, the gray-skinned leader, had once been an ambassador on a distant moon. He fell in love with a peacekeeper and was sentenced for emotional instability. Zaya, the bug-like medic, was a bioengineer who injected herself with a mutating serum so she could feel empathy. Her people called it biological treason. Even the ship's AI, Jorah, had defected from its creator's programming, refusing to erase the emotional data of fallen soldiers. Every corner of the ship carried pain, but also purpose. They weren't criminals. They were survivors of feeling. And Thomas was beginning to understand that he fit in better here than anywhere he'd ever been. One evening, as he repaired one of the aft stabilizers, Creel joined him with 2 cans of some fizzy blue drink that tasted like melted battery acid and mint. You're adjusting faster than expected, Creel said, tossing one to him. I've lived in war. In silence. In snow. This is not so bad. Creel studied him. You know they'll hunt you now. Not just for helping her. For feeling. It makes you a virus in their eyes. Thomas sipped the drink. Then I guess I'm contagious. Creel laughed. I like you, soldier. Then his tone dropped. But we have a problem. Thomas looked up. What kind? Lyra was tracked. Even with the beacon erased. Something in her blood was tagged before she escaped. We found it last night. Thomas froze. So they still know where she is. Creel nodded. Not exact, but enough. A signal spike like that won't go unnoticed for long. He stared at the glowing corridor, jaw clenched. We can't keep running forever, Thomas said. Creel nodded again. Then we changed the story. Later, in Lyra's quarters, Thomas told her everything. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. I know, she said quietly. They won't stop. You're not alone anymore, he said. She turned to him, eyes shimmering. But I bring danger to all. He stepped closer. You also brought truth to all. She exhaled slowly. They fear me not because I broke law, but because I feel. Exactly, he said. And that's power. Real power. She hesitated, then pulled something from a compartment in the wall. A small sphere, no larger than an orange. Inside, a holographic core shimmered like liquid glass. It's called a pulse core, one of the last pieces of their emotional suppression tech. I stole it before I fled. Thomas stared at it. Why bring it? So I wouldn't forget what they try to make me. He took the sphere gently, turned it in his hands. What if we show the universe what it really does? Lyra's eyes widened. That would be rebellion. Thomas smiled. Then let's rebel. That night, as the ship drifted toward the edge of known space, Lyra and Thomas stood side by side on the observation deck. Stars smeared across the dark like spilled silver. "You said once you were too much," he murmured. "Yes." He looked at her. "You were never too much. The world was too small." She looked at him with something fragile and bright in her eyes. "I thought love was weakness," she whispered. "But it's the only thing that ever made me strong." Thomas kissed her then. Not rushed, not desperate. Just real. Steady. Solid. The kind of kiss that said we survived, and we are still here. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through tears. And in that moment, even deep in the black, they had found light. The ship drifted beyond the edges of charted space, where stars were colder and distance meant safety. In this quiet stretch of nothingness, time no longer followed Earth's rules. Hours melted into cycles. Days became irrelevant. But something began to grow in that silence. It wasn't just healing. It was belonging. Lyra spent more time walking now, her movements steadier, her breathing strong. Her wound had faded to a faint scar, a dark blue mark across her collarbone. Thomas caught her tracing it sometimes, like a memory carved in skin. "You hate it?" he asked one morning. She shook her head. "No, I survived. It's part of me." Thomas nodded. "I get that." He had his own scars. Some visible, some buried under silence. They began training together in the lower bay, sparring, movement drills, close-range combat simulations. Not for war, for readiness, for control, for focus, and maybe for trust. One day, during a hand-to-hand sequence, she pinned him to the mat, eyes burning. "You're holding back," she said. "I'm not trying to hurt you. You won't." He stared up at her, confident. "I know your strength, but I don't mind to." Their breathing slowed in sync. Their bodies didn't move. Then, with a soft laugh, she let him up. Thomas sat beside her, heartbeat steady but full. "You're dangerous," he said. Her golden hair fell over her eyes. "Only to people who lie." He smiled. "Then I'm safe." She met his gaze. "You are the only safe place I've ever known." Creel watched them from the deck's upper level, arms crossed, antenna twitching. "You realize this is going to make you both targets," he said later that evening, when Thomas came to recalibrate the NAV systems. Thomas didn't even flinch. "We already are. You're not scared of the consequences." "I'm scared of wasting the time we have." Creel studied him for a long moment, then handed him a worn data crystal. "What's this?" Thomas asked. "Coordinates. There's a planet near the outer rim. Uninhabited. Atmospheric conditions similar to Earth. We use it as a supply dump. No one monitors it. You're saying we go there? I'm saying maybe it's time you both stop running and start choosing." That night, Thomas brought the idea to Lyra. She stood by the window, watching stars crawl past like frozen fireflies. "A planet," she murmured, "with no one else. Just open sky." He nodded. "No orders. No missions. Just us. And if they find us, then we fight." Her eyes shimmered. "You'd build a life with me on a rock no one's heard of?" Thomas stepped close. "I'd build a life with you in a cave full of space spiders if it meant waking up next to you." She laughed, genuinely, openly. It was the first time he'd heard it. It melted something inside him. "You really are mad," she said. "Maybe," he said, "but I know what I want." Her voice softened. "So do I." They landed 3 cycles later. The planet was rugged. Mountains stretching like the spine of the world, thick forests of silver-leaf trees, blue rivers that shimmered under twin moons. The air was cold, clean, and quiet. It reminded Thomas of Colorado, only freer. They set up camp near a cliffside, overlooking a valley where clouds moved like waves. The crew stayed for a few days to help build a shelter, power supply, weather shield, and basic defenses. Then, with one last nod, they left the 2 behind. No promises, no countdowns, just trust. In the first week, Lyra and Thomas lived like pioneers. They built together, cooked together, bathed in the river when it wasn't too cold, and argued about how to organize supplies. But none of it felt like survival. It felt like beginning. Every sunrise was earned, every scar acknowledged, every silence shared without fear. One evening, as wind swept through the cliff and the stars blinked to life above them, Lyra sat by the fire in a human jacket and alien boots, eating something that resembled roasted root and fish. Thomas brought her a drink, something made from fermented local berries. "It's not whiskey," he said, "but it's got kick." She sipped. Her face twisted. "It attacks." He laughed. "So it's working." She leaned into him. "Do you still dream of your world?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said, "but it feels small now. Not like I remembered. Because you outgrew it." He looked at her. "Maybe I was waiting for the right world to grow into." She kissed him then. No hesitation. No apology. Just certainty. And the fire between them wasn't from the flames. Later, lying beside him beneath a shelter of stone and stars, she whispered, "I was told love makes you weak." He ran his fingers down her back. They lied. She buried her face in his chest. "I feel stronger now than I've ever been." "Me too," he said, and they slept in peace. The silence of the valley broke at dawn. It wasn't birds, not wind, not wildlife. It was the sound of a ripple in the sky, a sharp distortion, like reality cracking open. Thomas was already halfway down the ridge when the air shimmered above their shelter. Lyra, still barefoot, stood outside the stone-walled cabin, eyes locked on the sky. "I felt it," she said. He followed her gaze. And there it was, a black rift hanging midair, pulsing, spinning slowly, humming like a machine and a heartbeat at once. From it, something emerged. Not a ship, a gate. Thomas grabbed his rifle. "That yours?" Lyra's voice was distant. "No. Worse." The rift widened, and then they came through. 6 figures, armored in obsidian plating, walked out of the void like shadows stepping into flame. Each one over 2 meters tall, faces covered, weapons unlike anything Thomas had ever seen. At the center, a taller figure, helmetless. His skin was the same pale blue as Lyra's, but colder, almost translucent. His eyes were steel gray. Lyra froze. "General Arvek." Thomas didn't need a translator. He felt the hate. "Brother." She nodded slowly. "Leader of the Order. He taught me everything, and cast me out." Thomas raised his rifle. Then he knows exactly who he's dealing with. Arvek spoke without moving his lips. His voice came through the air, telepathic and cold. "You betrayed us, Lyra. You infected the weak. You polluted the gene line with emotion." Lyra stepped forward. "I chose truth. I chose to feel. That makes me more evolved than you. You chose extinction." The soldiers raised their weapons. Thomas moved first. He fired at the left flank, just enough to break formation. Lyra launched forward with speed Thomas had never seen, energy pulsing from her hands as she collided with the closest attacker. The impact sent a shockwave across the cliffside. The battle was chaos. Thomas ducked behind stone pillars, reloading his plasma blasts carved through rock. Lyra danced between enemies, her movements fluid, calculated. She didn't hesitate. She couldn't. But Arvek didn't move. He simply watched, judged. 2 enemies cornered Thomas. He dropped one with a close-range shot, but took a hit to the shoulder. The force knocked him to the ground, pain blooming red-hot across his chest. Lyra screamed his name, but too late. The second soldier aimed at his heart. Thomas stared down death. Then Lyra appeared between them, shielding him. The blast hit her square in the back. She dropped. Thomas didn't feel the pain. Not yet. Only the sound, the thud of her body hitting snow. The silence after. He crawled to her, hands trembling, blood mixing with ice. "Lyra." Her eyes flickered. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here. You're going to be okay," he said, pressing down on the wound. She smiled weakly. "You always lie to me. Only when I have to." Her hand touched his face. "Live," she whispered. "No. Please." Arvek stepped forward. "Look what your love has cost you, human." Thomas stood slowly, blood on his hands, ice in his lungs, rage in his chest. "She didn't fall because of love," he said. "She stood because of it." Arvek sneered. "Your kind doesn't understand sacrifice." "You're right," Thomas said. Then he threw Lyra's stolen pulse core, right at Arvek's feet. The explosion wasn't fire. It was emotion. Raw, untethered, amplified by the core. A psychic burst of every suppressed feeling Lyra had carried. Grief, rage, hope, love, radiating outward like a supernova. Arvek stumbled. So did his soldiers. The blast knocked Thomas flat, vision swimming in violet light. When he rose, gasping, the invaders were frozen, paralyzed, clutching their heads, armor sparking. Lyra lay still. Too still. Thomas crawled to her, lifted her into his arms. She was burning with energy, but her eyes stayed shut. "You did it," he whispered. "You stopped them." But her breathing, it was fading. He pressed his forehead to hers. "Stay, please." No response. Then her wrist device glowed, soft, golden. A signal. He didn't know what he was activating. He just pressed it. A moment later, Creel's voice came through the air. "We're picking up a burst from the surface. Are you alive?" Thomas held the signal to his lips. "She is. But not for long. Stay there. We're coming." 10 minutes later, the sky split again. But this time, it brought salvation. The rebel ship descended like a guardian star, wind and light whipping the snow into spirals. Creel and Zaya rushed out. They carried her inside. Thomas followed, hands shaking, heart numb. Zaya worked in silence. Tubes, stimulants, pulse checks. Thomas stood in the corner, unable to breathe. Then, after what felt like a lifetime, Lyra coughed. Her eyes opened. She saw him, and smiled. He broke. He fell to his knees beside her, forehead to hers. "I thought I lost you," he choked. "You almost did," she said. Then she kissed him, fierce, deep, alive. Outside, the enemy lay broken. Inside, they had each other, and no one would ever take that from them again. The enemy never got up. Whatever the Pulse Corps had done, it had left them drained, armor cracked, systems fried, consciousness fragmented. Arvek and his soldiers were airlifted by Creel's crew and sent into deep freeze containment aboard a forgotten satellite orbit. No executions, no revenge, just silence. The kind that follows truth when it can no longer be denied. The valley felt different after the battle. Colder, quieter, wiser. Thomas and Lyra returned days later, escorted by the rebels, who helped rebuild the shelter and strengthen the defenses. But once the last cable was wired and the final plank hammered in, the crew said their goodbyes. Creel's farewell was simple, a nod, a hand on Thomas's shoulder, and the words, "You're not just surviving anymore. You're living. Don't waste it." Then the ship was gone, swallowed by stars. Thomas and Lyra stood at the edge of the cliff once more, watching the twin moons climb over the mountains. She leaned against him, still weak but alive, her heartbeat steady against his ribs. "They won't come back," she said. He glanced at her. "You sure?" "They can't. What we released from that core, it wasn't just emotion. It was memory. Mine. Theirs. They'll need time to process. Maybe to feel. Do you think they'll change?" She shrugged. "Some. Others will double down. But the door's open now." "Yes," she said. "And once it opens, it never fully closes again." Life slowed into something real. They cooked over open fire, grew vegetables in makeshift hydro boxes, fished in the river, hunted together, slept tangled in furs when the cold pressed in too hard. Sometimes they spoke for hours. Other days, barely a word passed between them. But nothing needed translation anymore. Love had taught them a language older than speech. One morning, Thomas found Lyra sketching by the fire. He leaned over her shoulder. "What's that?" She held up the drawing. It showed a large structure, part home, part tower, with solar sails and reinforced domes. A future built on roots and sky. "Plan," she said. "For us. For others. If they come." He blinked. "You want to open this place to more?" "Not yet. But one day. Emotion saved us. Others will need it, too." He studied the lines on the paper. Rough, but full of intention. "You're not just building a home," he said. "You're building hope." She looked up at him. "No one else ever saw that in me," she said. "I did. You always do." That night, he gave her a necklace. A simple string of small stones. One from the cliff, one from the river, one from the place she nearly died. She touched it like it was made of starlight. "What is it?" "Proof," he said, "that we're still here." She pulled him close. "I want to stay here until the stars die," she whispered. "Then we'd better start planting more food." He smiled. She laughed against his chest. And the universe, for once, felt quiet enough to hear it. There was no monument, no great tower, no statue, no plaque, just a trail of footprints carved in the frozen dirt, leading from the edge of the cliff to the river, and back to the fire where two people had chosen to stay. Together. Time moved differently here. No one counted days. There were only moments. The time Lyra burned the stew, but insisted it was culturally intentional. The time Thomas carved a bench from fallen branches and surprised her on a cold morning. The time they argued for hours over what to name a wild, six-legged creature that kept stealing their food. They compromised with Bandit. These were the markers of their new life. Not alarms, not orders, not war, just being. Sometimes Lyra would watch the stars and whisper names of constellations from her home planet. Ancient stories her people had abandoned in favor of logic and dominance. I used to think none of this mattered, she confessed once. That feelings were distractions. Flaws. Thomas sat beside her, their backs against the stone. And now I know they're the only part of us that isn't disposable. He took her hand. You taught me that. She shook her head. You reminded me. They didn't talk much about the past anymore. But sometimes in quiet hours it returned. The cabin in Colorado. The blood on the snow. Her collapse. His scream. And the moment she opened her eyes again, and the universe started to make sense. Pain didn't vanish. It just softened. Lost and disappear. It grew roots and gave them something to stand on. One cold morning, Thomas asked, if none of that had happened, if you'd never crashed, never found me, where do you think you'd be now? Lyra considered it. Alive, probably, but empty. He nodded. Same. And she said something that stuck in his bones. I was never too much. I was just waiting for someone who had room for everything I was. He looked at her for a long time, then replied, you were never impossible to love. They just didn't have the courage to try. Later that week, a signal came through the long-range receiver. It was weak, patchy, and audio burst on a closed rebel frequency. Creel's voice. Others are waking up. Arvek soldiers began speaking, feeling. One even wept. We're documenting it. The core did more than stun them. It cracked them open. They're asking questions now. About choice. About emotion. About you. Thomas turned the receiver toward Lyra. She listened in silence. You two started something, Creel continued, and it's spreading. Lyra didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was barely above a breath. I thought we were just trying to survive. Thomas placed his hand over hers. We were. But we didn't just survive. We changed something. Yes, he said, and it began with one word no one was brave enough to say. She looked at him. Which word? He smiled. Love. They had no audience. No medals. No anthem. But they had each other. And sometimes, in the grand machinery of the stars, that was enough to start a revolution. The cabin had grown. What started as a stone-walled shelter had become something more. Part greenhouse, part observatory, part archive of quiet rebellion. They never intended to build a colony. But over time, the universe had other plans. It began with a single visitor, a wide-eyed medic from a distant system, carrying questions no one else dared to ask. How did you survive with her? What did it feel like to fall in love with a defector? Then came a pilot, then a data engineer, then a teenage exile with a cracked voice who wanted to learn what trust meant. They didn't stay forever, but they all returned to the stars changed. Lyra called it the quiet place, a refuge beyond language, beyond orders, where emotion wasn't a weakness, it was a compass. Thomas planted earth flowers beside her native vines. Some bloomed red, others silver. All survived the winter. Sometimes they sat together at dusk, watching new arrivals land. You realize, Thomas said once, you're the heart of a movement. She shook her head. No, we are. He smiled. How many times do I have to fall for you? As many as it takes. They didn't age the same way. Lyra's species lived longer, slower. Her skin barely changed. Her eyes stayed sharp. Thomas went gray early. Shoulders stiffened. Hands shook more in the mornings. But she never pulled away. One night, under the twin moons, she held his hand a little longer. You're not afraid of the end? He exhaled. Not if it means I gotta live this. She nodded. Then promise me one thing. Anything. When they ask who built this place, tell them it was because someone once said I was impossible to love. He leaned close, kissed her gently, and that someone was wrong. Years passed. A monument did appear, eventually. It wasn't carved in stone. It was etched into data, passed hand to hand, whispered in underground channels, a phrase that lit up systems like wildfire. She felt. He stayed. The galaxy changed. If you made it this far, if you've ever loved someone the world said wasn't right, If you believe that emotion isn't a flaw, but the fuel for something bigger, then this story was yours too. Thank you for being part of it. If you want more stories like this, human, alien, impossible, and real, subscribe, comment, and spread the signal. Because feeling is the beginning of everything. We'll be waiting. Out there. Somewhere. Under two moons.